Joining me on the show today is my dear friend, Kim Vargas. This episode is going to feel a little bit more like an intimate conversation between two friends, because that's exactly what it is. Kim is a dear friend of mine that I've had the pleasure to know for a couple of years now. She's married to Pete Vargas, owner at Advance Your Reach, and has such an incredible story to share that I couldn't wait to have her on the show. Every time I'm with Kim, she has such a sense of peace and calmness about her that makes you feel so safe and so loved. And even though she's faced unbelievable hardship and challenges and hurt and pain in her life, she exudes a confidence about her, a quiet strength about her that is really remarkable. And I know when you watch this episode, you're going to walk away with a completely different perspective on life and relationships and the way you face the hard things in life. I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's jump in. Hey, Kim, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This is going to be a really special treat for our listeners because Kim is a dear friend of mine that I love so much. And I feel like this is just kind of going to be her and I pretending we're sitting on the couch next to each other chatting. So I think our listeners are really going to get to enjoy a little bit more intimate conversation here between two friends. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, that's why I'm here, because it can feel like that.
Yeah. So you have such an incredible story. And of course, I know it and our listeners don't. And I thought we could kind of go back to your 20s. You know, you're young, you're in your 20s, you're falling in love, starting a relationship. And really, that's when some challenges in your life started. So let's just go back to like early 20s. Tell me about your life, what life was like then.
Yeah. Well, early 20s was a little different for me than probably most 20-year-olds when you graduate high school and start college and are excited to do all the things. I was in I did a community school just right away my plan was for the first 2 years or so. And halfway through the first year, I was in a car accident and it kind of caused all these little things to start happening, which led us to having to dive in to see what was going on. And it ended up being a diagnosis of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So I was 20 years old, like a month into being 20, and I get a diagnosis of something I've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just kind of like a little frozen at first with what was even happening. I felt like I was an 80-year-old, and that I think came in with the rheumatoid arthritis and how the lupus was affecting my body. So my 20s kicked off quite different than what in your teens you expect your 20s to look like.
Yeah.
So I wasn't doing all the things everyone was doing.
So for those listening that aren't familiar with what lupus is, could you just do a brief description of what that is?
Yeah. So lupus is an autoimmune, which has become way more known now than it was 25 years ago when I was diagnosed. It's an autoimmune. So my body, there's a couple kinds. I have systematic, which affects your organs. So my body sees itself as foreign, and is constantly fighting itself. So anything healthy, good or bad, it's fighting it. So I remember like a couple weeks into my diagnosis, I was babysitting and I heard the word lupus come across the TV, had never heard of it before. And I remember closing the fridge door and seeing across the TV, lupus can kill you.
Oh, wow.
And just kind of being like, I've never seen the commercial again or like heard about it, but I will forever remember that and just being like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. And so there's no cure for lupus, right?
No, they do not know what causes it. There is a book that my now husband had got when we had first met. And the first sentence in it said, if you can understand lupus, you can understand medicine, because it's just like, no,
it's just so foreign.
Yeah.
So what are some of I've heard of like lupus flare-ups and like different things like that. What are the kinds of symptoms that you would experience through lupus? Because sometimes you can feel okay. Is that correct? And then other times not?
Yeah, they call it kind of an invisible disease because from the outside, a lot of times you can look totally fine. The way it affected me, and it's probably different for other people, was in my joints were the biggest like daily thing. So I couldn't like bend my hands. I couldn't open jars. I couldn't blow dry my own hair. My mom would have to blow dry my hair because I couldn't lift my arms up. It was it was very much crippling in my body to where I had to be on super high doses of steroids to even get out of bed.
Mm.
So that was my main thing. It progressed over the years to attack specific organs, but the joints were like the main thing at the beginning.
Wow.
So
you're moving through your 20s trying to manage lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, which rheumatoid arthritis also affects the joints and different things like that. So you have like a double whammy. And you meet Pete. Some of our audience will know Pete Vargas. You meet Pete. You guys get married. Tell me about the early days of your marriage and relationship when you're dealing with planning a family and knowing that you have an illness that you're going to have to live with for your whole life.
Yeah, I will give Pete a lot of credit because he kind of came into the picture in the thick of it. It was probably some of the worst parts of just at the beginning. So he saw the good, bad, and the ugly right away and knew with not knowing like what he was getting into. Our dating life, there were a lot of different like hospitalizations and stuff. So it was just kind of it was super in the thick of it. When we were dating, we would make comments of adopting. Like we knew we both had kind of a desire for that. Mine had been there since I was younger before a diagnosis. And then with the diagnosis, I had doctors just telling me, because I was in my 20s, they were telling me, like, this can never happen. You've got to be on all these things to make sure it doesn't ever happen. And then when I got married, it was even more full force of all the things that could not happen. And if they could, what it could do, possibly do to my health to be even worse. So that was something we knew like at the very beginning. Pete, I think always in his heart hoped maybe it would be possible because he's not one to hear no.
Yeah.
I am more of a rule follower. So I'm like, okay, this is what they say. This is what we do. So it was, our dating life was a lot of navigating health things, which is kind of not the fairy tale, I guess.
Yeah.
But it also helped us kind of get to know how each other operated in difficult times and like when things didn't maybe go the way you thought they would go or look the way your friends' lives and marriages and dating lives looked like. So it was a crash course, I guess, in life.
Yeah, I mean, some people are married 5, 10, 15 years before they might face a major health crisis or some kind of major crisis. And, you guys facing that right out of the gate, you got to see how each other was going to handle really hard things that don't necessarily have an end in sight, right? Like it's easier when we can say, oh, we're going to do this and then they're going to treat this and then it'll be good and it'll be done. And you're faced with something that's like, we are being told we shouldn't get pregnant or that we might not ever be able to get pregnant. If we do, it would be dangerous. And also, like you said, part of your dating life was like hospital visits, right? And so the fact that hits you guys very early on in your relationship and you guys were able to work through that, number one, I just think speaks volumes about how special your relationship is. To be able to face that early on and it not completely destroy your relationship. Because for some guys, they'd be like, I don't want to deal with this. Like,
Right.
I'm out.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Totally understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were saying like you're a rule follower, so did you guys just be like, okay, we're not going to get pregnant because it's not safe? Or were you like, well, let's try and see what happened and you couldn't get pregnant? Like what decision did you guys make?
So at the very, very beginning when we were married, we did do one of the birth control, like the patch or something, I think they suggested. And we did that for maybe a few months. And then there was everything that they wanted me to be on, there were issues that would work against me, like the anemic or different things that would cause me, well, you can't take this one, you can't take that one. So really it ended up being we did nothing. And it was just kind of like, well, I guess we'll see what happens. Um, so yeah, it's kind of both. I guess he was happy because we didn't follow the rules, and there weren't many rules I could follow at that point.
Yeah. So no birth control. So y'all are like, we're just going to no birth control. Whatever happens, happens was kind of the attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or did you believe that like you just wouldn't even get pregnant? Did you believe that? Or did you think it was possible?
I I kind of, after a while, so I was diagnosed at 20. I would say before I was 21, I had to start chemo treatments. And that was for the lupus, which sounded super weird, but it
Yeah.
was a route that they did. So before we even got married, I had already done so many rounds of chemo that it quickly turned from you can't to even if you wanted to, like the
It won't.
chemo has pretty much wiped that possibility out. So
Wow.
I think that would have been even before we were married. So the chances we knew were already pretty nil because
Right.
of that. So there
Okay.
wasn't a super like risk factor that we were taking by being on nothing.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you guys decide to adopt, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that first adoption process. Like, tell us what that was like and what happened.
Yeah. So we were married. It would have been 5 years before we got to that point because we had to kind of get everything else somewhat under control before we were ready to bring a baby in. So we originally started looking at Haiti and China. Haiti had some really wonky laws that made that quickly go out. China, we were told that we could not adopt from there because they looked at lupus like cancer, but they would give us a child that was special needs, which seemed super
Yeah.
contradicting.
Yeah.
So those quickly changed. So we started with a local agency, and it took, I want to say, by the time we were in it and got completed with everything, we had gotten a call maybe 3 months later of a birth mom that just had a baby and had picked us in the hospital through our book. So it happened pretty quick once we got into the process. So I remember we were out running errands. We had to drive home, throw clothes in a bag, go to Babies R Us, buy a car seat because we didn't expect it to happen that
Yeah.
fast.
You weren't prepared.
No. So we had to like do all this super quick. I remember going in the bathroom and throwing up because it was just like your nerves and your adrenaline were, I think, go too much for my body. We go up to the hospital. My mom was in town visiting. We go to the hospital and meet the birth mom and hear kind of like her story and why she chose us. And we meet this baby that we name, and they set us up in a room next to her. We stay the night, and it's all like going weirdly smooth and just kind of like, I guess this is how it goes. It was our first experience.
Yeah. You didn't know any different.
No. So the next morning, you go through a process where the birth mom in the hospital gets all the say on how she wants everything to go. I remember she chose that she wanted us to leave first. And that feeling of walking out of the hospital with this baby in a car seat and the birth mom still in the hospital felt so foreign, like we were doing something we shouldn't be doing. And we had just had this whole conversation with her before we left. And I remember having to balance it's our best day and it's her worst day.
Yes.
And how you had to balance those and
Mixed
hold
feelings.
both.
Yeah.
It's a feeling that I will never, ever forget doing.
Yeah.
So we get through that day. We named her Emma Grace. We bring her home and just like dive into what it is to have a newborn and your friends coming over to see her. And it was like a dream. It was a dream come true
Yeah.
those first few days.
I want to address one of the things you said about like you were having your best day and she was having her worst day. And
Yeah.
that happens a lot in life, right? It even happens to us. We're having our worst day and somebody else is having their best day.
Yeah.
And that's it takes a lot of emotional maturity to be able to recognize that and hold space for both, because that's a really challenging place to be, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So Emma Grace is home. How did things go from there?
She's home. We had a group of friends that had been walking this whole journey with us. So they all come over, I think the next day, and just to meet her and to celebrate with her, because we're the first in our group at that point to have adopted. So it's just this whole new celebration of things. So
Mm-hmm.
they all come over and we get a phone call. I remember I was in the living room with Emma and our friends, and Pete had gone to the other room to take this phone call. And I hear him from the other side of the house just begin to wail.
Gosh.
Like a sound I had never heard come out of him. And so we kind of all move into that room to see what's going on. And I find out with our whole group of friends that the birth mom had second thoughts. So in Colorado, in every state, there's a different law of how much time the birth parents have to change their mind or whatnot before everything's completely filed. So Colorado was 6 days. There's some states that have 6 months, which I can't even
Oh,
imagine.
wow. Wow.
Ours was 6 days. So this was 3 days in, and we get this phone call, and we're basically left with the only decision we get in this, like in the whole thing, is do you want to bring her into the agency office right now, or do you want to wait and do it in the morning?
Oh,
So we
gosh.
chose the morning because
Yeah.
just to give us some time, I
Yeah.
guess. And our friends were all there, which could make it harder, but I think it was better for us to have
Mhm.
somebody there to catch you,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And then I remember sleeping. I don't know why. We slept on the couch the whole night with her and just cried
Yeah.
the whole night.
Yeah.
Um, the next morning, Pete, me, my mom, she was still in town. She was supposed to fly home that day. It was her birthday, and she was heading home. And we go and load up the car seat. We take her to the agency, which was just a few miles away. It was in our town. And we walk in to a meeting room, and they have this big old table, and our caseworker's on one end, and we sit there with her. And then birth mom and her mom, who we had met in the hospital, are on the opposite end.
Wow.
And our caseworker just allows us to like share or ask or say what we need to say. And Pete starts going. He's angry, understandably. He's angry, and he just starts like questioning her on everything she had told us. How could she do this? All of that. Then my mom does a little of the same. And then Pete's like, well, now it's your turn to me. And I remember I was sitting between Pete and my mom, and I'm holding Emma, just looking at her the whole time there, saying what they needed to say. And we're not getting a whole lot back from the birth mom, and it didn't even matter. There's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
she could say. There's nothing she needed to say. I can't even imagine being in her seat and
Mhm.
making the choice she did both times,
Both
the
times. Yeah.
choices she had made. But I remember just holding her, and Pete nudges me and he's like, what do you want to say? And I think he expected me to kind of maybe be able to give the final like shot at her, or maybe something that may make her change her mind, which would have been not the right thing.
Yeah.
And I remember the only thing that I could think to say was thank you.
Mm.
Um, I just said thank you for the last 3 days, and I couldn't look at her when I said it. I remember my eyes were only on Emma, and after that, we handed her over and we walked out with an empty car seat to stick
Mm.
back in the car and take my mom to the airport. Um, I will say when we got in the car, it was almost instantly, and it was Pete, myself, and my mom, but a peace came over us that I can't explain,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful that it did as quickly as it did.
Yeah.
But this peace just like fell over us, and we were all just quiet and just like, okay, here
Yeah.
we go. So that was our introduction to adoption.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we all know as mothers, whether you've adopted or you've given birth, either way, as a mother, we can only imagine the difficult decision it is to give up your child in the first place for adoption, right? And you guys were having your best day, like you said, her worst. And then just 3 days later, just 72 hours later, it's flip flopped, right? Your hearts are
Yes.
broken. You feel like you've lost something. It's almost like a miscarriage or the loss of a child, right? Like you said, walking out with that empty car seat. That's what you experience when maybe when you have given up your child or you've had a stillbirth or a miscarriage or something. And now she's elated that, okay, I'm getting my baby back.
Yeah.
Um, and so just the amount of emotion and mixed feelings during that time. And like you said, it was from, you guys experienced everything from anger to thankfulness to peace in this really short period of time.
Yeah.
And how did you guys work through that? And like, how did you decide we want to do this again? Because for some people might experience that and be like, this was too painful. I can't do this again.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear stories of parents who lose a child or through like an illness or something sudden. And that was very much what it felt like.
Yeah.
Um, but you hear stories on how that's one of the like number one causes for divorce. Like the percentage of parents who have lost a child
Mm-hmm.
who do not make it in their marriage is extremely high.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it was something that brought Pete and I closer than even dealing with any of my health stuff had. It was something that nobody else we knew had experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know somebody else who experienced it but each other.
Yeah.
It was like you wanted to be closer to the person who knew how you felt the most.
Mm-hmm.
Um so it bonded us. Probably we had been married at that point over 5 years, and it probably gave this completely whole new bond that we hadn't yet
Mm-hmm.
experienced.
Yeah.
Over the net, I want to say, so that was in May. We got back into the process really quickly, I would say within a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
um, because we had known from when we were dating and engaged that we would have 4, maybe 5. That's what we always said.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have 4, maybe 5. And we just always knew that. And we knew adoption was going to be a big part of that story.
Yeah.
So we didn't waste time because we had already been married over 5 years.
Right.
And you never know how long it takes. So we had gotten back in. We had a few situations where a birth parent would pick us and then they would take advantage of the system or different things. There's so many different dynamics within
Mm-hmm.
that. And then it was 10 months after Emma that we got another call that similarly she was in labor. So they say if you get a call that's last minute, that can be a red flag. And we were probably told that before with Emma, but when you're in the throes of it and you're just excited, you're not thinking, or what are the chances that's going to
Yeah.
happen to you?
Yeah.
So we get the second call and she's in labor. They were going to call us on Monday. It was Easter morning at like 3 a.m. when we got the call. And they were going to call us Monday to set up a time to meet, but she had gone into labor early.
Mm.
So this is now 5 to 6 hour drive through the mountains, and it's Easter. So in Colorado, we get snow on Easter a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So we had packed up and drove through a snowstorm to get to where she was at. And Pete was a mess the whole drive. He was a mess. And then I want to say somewhere an hour out, he had heard faith is a big part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete had heard clearly and just in his spirit that the baby was ours and that it's a boy is what he was.
Mm.
So the
Mm.
birth mom had no prenatal care, nothing. So we knew absolutely nothing going in. We knew
Wow.
it could be, there's just no knowing.
Yeah.
And when you get these calls, they ask a super unique question is they'll tell you what they know about the situation. And then they'll say, do you want the baby?
Mm.
And it's a question that can stop you in your tracks because it's
Yeah.
like, it's just not natural.
Right.
You know, typically you get pregnant, you go through the whole thing, excitement to have this baby, and you're getting this call of here's a situation really quick. Do you want the baby? And so we had said yes, and we go and he feels this, he hears that the baby is ours and it's a boy. So we get to the hospital, we meet the birth mom. 40 minutes later, a baby boy is born.
Wow.
And we have him the whole time in the hospital. They bring him directly to us. We go through all the different testings with them and everything. And it's again the time where it's time to leave and do the whole your best day, their hardest day, which
Mm-hmm.
it's still our best day, but our best day is now held with a lot of trauma from
Yeah.
what had happened 10 months before.
Uncertainty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete was really feeling that. There is a point right before we left where she wanted time with our son Keaton. She wanted time with him to say
Mm-hmm.
goodbye. And
Mm-hmm.
Pete's mind was just like on the attack of
Like, no.
it's going to
Yeah.
happen again. She's going to
Yeah.
change her mind.
Yeah.
How could you hold this baby and still choose to give it away?
Yeah.
And so he was struggling, and I had to just sit in what we were told. The baby is ours and it's a boy.
Yeah.
And what I had told him, he's like, aren't you nervous? Because he would like go walk down the hall, come back. Aren't you nervous? And I remember saying, I don't want to miss out. If all of this goes away and he is ours, I don't want to look back and miss out on this day or the next day or the next day that we held back because we were afraid.
Yeah. Wow.
So we had to just make the choice, which is really hard to do when you have
Yeah.
all the proof to say what could happen. We had to make the choice to say, we are going all in no matter what. We've already experienced the worst case scenario and we
Mm-hmm.
survived, and we're going to make the choice to maybe experience it again. And thankfully, those 6 days were the longest 6 days of waiting until it could be filed. Everything went through, and Keaton's now about to be 16. So he is
Wow.
he is our second baby, but our first, you know.
Right.
Emma will
Yeah.
always be in there.
You have always struck me as someone who has such a quiet strength. Like you're a very calm, mild-mannered, person that I just love and adore. And a lot of times people who are kind of quiet and sit back are often dismissed a little bit. And you have just a way of being able to see what really matters in the middle of something and being able to hold on and have strength during that and to maintain perspective that I think a lot of people either don't have or don't tap into. And I just love, I know there's way more of your story we're going to get to in a minute, but I didn't want to miss that of you talking about just your ability to be able to look at this and say, I know what happened before. I know what could go wrong. but I don't want to miss out on this moment if it does go right.
Yeah.
And, to hold on to that. And so have you just always been that way? Or is that something that you developed through dealing with lupus, or because that quiet strength about you and being able to keep perspective in really hard moments is so special about you?
Thank you, Adrienne. I don't know. I don't know if my health taught it to me. I feel like since I was really young, it's kind of just been how I was created, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, I remember being really young and having my grandmother would be in the car. We would go somewhere in the car, and it's like where she would have you, captive, where you can talk to the kids or something. And I've always been super quiet and introverted. And so I internal processor and all of that. So it'd be her chance to kind of dig in. And I remember she would always be trying to pull out anger. Like, what's upsetting to you? Or aren't you upset about that? Or don't you wish things were different? Whether it was parents' divorce or my health or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just being asking pointed questions, even to the point as I got older of, do you ever feel angry at God for
Yeah.
the diagnosis or for what you're missing out on or for the disappointments and all that?
Yeah.
And I remember feeling do I make something up? Because that's what she wants to hear, but
Mm-hmm.
truly not feeling it. And I don't know if that's just a personality thing or if that is something that God specifically gave to me, knowing what my journey would be.
Yeah.
Because I think that is definitely what's got me through a lot of it, is being
Yeah.
able to have more of an outward perspective. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost I feel like it's my superpower, and also can be my worst quality is I'm always can see what somebody else might feel to where it can diminish where I'm at. But
Yeah.
having that, being able to put yourself in both shoes, like my shoes and the birth mom's shoes, really neutralizes what's going on
Yeah.
in an interesting
That's,
way.
yeah. That I definitely think that's a very special gift that God gave you because He knew the challenges you were going to be facing in your life for sure. That is definitely part of it. But I think that even people who don't have that natural gift we can consciously work at trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes, right? That empathy, like you talked about. And empathy can be a real powerful tool to use when we're facing our own pain. And like you said, you have to be careful not to allow it to diminish your own pain and just make you feel for the other person and make your own pain be unimportant or dismiss it. But to be able to carry both,
Yeah.
I feel this way, but I also know this other person is feeling this way. And to have empathy and compassion for that is where true, I think, growth, healing, connection can happen in life. Yeah.
100%. I kind of walk my kids through that when they're dealing with something at school or different things. I have to catch myself to not take, because it's what it can look like is I'm taking the other person's side, but to walk them
Yes.
through okay, I understand you feel this, and that is so real to you right now. And there's also another side to it.
Yeah.
And if you can maybe try to put yourself in those shoes, you might look at the whole situation differently, or how you respond will be different. So
Yeah.
it's been interesting to walk my kids through
Yeah.
those type of things.
Yeah. And I've faced the same thing as I used to when my kids would come to me and they'd complain about a friend that did this or that. And I'd be like, well, maybe they were having a bad day, or maybe, and I would try to not dismiss, but try to explain away why that person treated them that way. And like you said, we have to, in that moment, it didn't help my child to do that. It made them feel dismissed. And so to be able to have that balance where you're acknowledging their feelings and those are real and those are true. And then once they're a little bit calmer, being able to see from the other perspective, I think is so healthy. So healthy. And if more people could do that, we'd we'd live in a different world, I think.
Yes, it's a muscle for sure.
Yeah. So you guys take this beautiful baby boy, Keaton, home. They make it through the 6 days. He's all yours. What happens next?
Yeah, so we're living the life with a little boy who's easy and beautiful and perfect in every way. And then we have, I want to say it was maybe a year, just over a year later, we have a dear friend of ours come to us and tell us that there's somebody that he knows really well. Their daughter had just found out she was pregnant and was considering adoption, and if we would talk to her. And we're like, well, if she wants to, we'll talk to her. Keaton's just over a year. So we weren't even in the like mind frame of having another one yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked to her and get connected. She ends up going to a ministry in Nashville through her pregnancy. And we, she has the baby in December. So Keaton is 20 months old when the next baby's born, and we go to Nashville, and everything is just like we're kind of getting the hang of it now of how this works, and the feelings that are going to come don't shock us as much, and we're a little more prepared. And the difference in this one is like we're a little more prepared, and we have Keaton.
Right.
There's something in that too of just like, okay, again, we can make it through anything. We've made it through this. We made it through this. We've got him. We're going all in. And that's the only way we knew how to do it, is to go all in. And being out of state, this was our first one that was out of state. You have to stay in the state for whatever their law is. So there it was 14 days until we could come home, until paperwork is filed and all that. And there was this time, thankfully, there was no hesitation or like fear of that.
Mm-hmm.
But 6 days in, I had been having some headaches and stuff. And on the 6th day, so we name her Mia. So Mia's 6 days old. And I all of a sudden have got all these weird things happening where I can't see my like Pete walks into a room and I'm pouring a drink in a cup and it's just like not even going into the cup and I'm not even aware I'm doing it. All of these things start happening and I faint. He has to call 911. We're the night before we're supposed to travel home to Colorado with both a 6-day-old and a 20-month-old in a hotel room in a city that's not our own.
Right.
So he has to call 911. We find friends in town who have newly married, no babies of their own, and Pete hands them a 6-day-old and a 20-month-old. I'm sure Pete gave him no instructions because his mind probably was in the sense. I'm rushed to the hospital and come to find out I'm having a stroke and my brain is swelling and all of these things that the lupus was attacking in my system. So my kidneys, my brain, my lungs, all these things are happening. And we're now again moving from like best day, we're about to travel home with baby number 2 to our worst day. And my mom flies in, my grandma flies in, and like a day and a half later, my mom is sitting across from Pete in the cafeteria. I'm intubated and
You weren't
doing
even
whatever.
breathing on your own.
No, I have no memory of anything for weeks of a time. And Pete's sitting across the cafeteria with my mom, and she's telling him, you have to make a decision. Like, they have to tell the birth family what's going on. So it's like, are you ready to be a parent, a single parent to 2 babies?
Oh my gosh.
Knowing her daughter is him in there. My mom's having to like step outside of it and present this question.
Yeah.
And this is all things that I've been told. And Pete somehow says yes for a 31-year-old guy to make that decision is something that I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And so we're given the outcome, 3 possibilities. I don't make it. I make it, but will never be able to like talk do any of the things.
Mm.
And the best outcome was being transferred back to Denver and having to about a 2-year process to relearn all of my motor functions.
Oh
That
my
was the
gosh.
best case scenario. And he chose to stay all in with
Mm.
both babies, not knowing what the future was going to look like, and started that next journey with Mia.
Wow. Has he shared, I'm sure he has he shared with you in those moments, like how he made that decision, what was going through his mind of like deciding, do we keep this baby? Like, what am I doing with my wife? Am I keeping her on life support? Like, has he shared any of that with you?
I don't He hasn't talked about it being a hard decision. I think it was
Yeah.
just like an instant
Like, what else?
decision for
This
him.
is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think Pete's a planner, and
Mm-hmm.
when there's a plan, he's gonna go full force with that, and I think for him, he's like, "No, this was our plan together. I'm not about to change the plan without her having a say. This is just what we're doing."
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was kind of an instant for him, which is an interesting flip because he was the one that had faced more of the fear
Yeah.
before, and
Yeah.
now he's having to kind
Make a
of not.
very big decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you're sitting here with us today. And so the worst case scenarios didn't happen.
Yep.
What was that journey like? Like, how did you go from being intubated on life support in the hospital to taking home Keaton and Mia back to Colorado and from there?
Yeah. So I was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks, and the night before we were able to leave, I walked down the hall to sign papers to finalize Mia's because I couldn't do that beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete, I don't really remember, I kind of do, but Pete said the halls were lined because there was no possible chance that was going to be an outcome.
Yeah.
So doctors and nurses just like clapping and all the things.
Oh
We
my
flew
gosh.
home the next day. It was Christmas Eve that we flew
Mm.
home with Mia. A friend of ours had come and gotten Keaton because we didn't know what it would look like. Flew home with Mia, and my kidneys had shut down in the process of the stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And that was December. 8 months later, in July, I had a kidney transplant that my mom had donated her kidney.
Wow.
And like from the moment that I had left the hospital, even on dialysis for 8 months, my numbers were showing that the lupus was like asleep
Mm.
and inactive.
Wow.
So it went from like
Almost killing
possibly
you.
taking my life to like non existent.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
That is,
One
that
of
is a
many.
miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, there's so many things that you and Pete have been through with the health and the adoption, the stroke, and all the things. Like, it's just incredible to me that this continued to strengthen your relationship instead of just tearing your marriage apart. Because, like you said, most couples who've been through one traumatic thing can't survive it usually. But you guys are
Yeah.
just getting hit over and over and over again. And now you are taking care of two littles. You've had a kidney transplant, a stroke. Like, what is life like at that time, and how are you guys getting through it?
The only way we got through that was our community. We've been super blessed to have a big group. We have no family where we live. My family was in Michigan, Pete's was in Texas, we're in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
but we have an adopted family, like a
Mm.
chosen family here
Yeah.
that has walked with us through all of it.
Yeah.
And that they really came in to surround us and to fill the gaps and to help carry the parts that we couldn't do on our own and all of that. So it was 100% the people around us. And I think Pete and my's narrative that has been from very early on, and especially after Emma Grace, was if we can get through this, we can get through anything.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just kind of been the unspoken. We don't always have to be like, if we got through that, we
Mhm.
can handle this.
No.
But it's been like this inner strength that we've had to hold on to. Like, if that didn't take us out, neither will this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
So,
there's so many themes, reoccurring things that I'm hearing from you in this, and it's like, number one, you just kept going, right? You just reset again and again. I have a resilience playbook that has these things in it, and you're talking about resetting again and again, right? Like holding on to truth, holding on to your faith. You guys, we have what's called building a book of evidence, right? That's what you said. If we can get through this, look, we made it through that we thought we couldn't get through. We made it through that. We made it through that. So like each thing that you guys are facing and going through, while it could have crushed you, instead it built resilience, right? It built your strength. It built your bond. You allowed it to become something that strengthened you instead of destroyed you. And that's a big part of why I even do these shows, is because there's people listening that are feeling hopeless, that are feeling like, I don't know if I can keep going. And I want them to see that they have that strength within them. Like I said, you said, like, I'm an introvert. I usually, you in the crowd, I've hung out with you many times in the crowd. You're the quiet one that's sitting there and listening. But just the strength and resolve and resiliency that is within you has come from you just getting back up and continuing. You just keep going.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that community portion is super important, because what happens, I've seen a lot of times when people face hard things and they'll start to isolate, right? They'll start to pull back from people. They'll start to be like, I don't want to be hurt by people anymore. This person hurt me. That person hurt me. This happened. And they start to pull away, or they don't want to ask for help, right? I'll look weak if I ask for help. I want to look strong. And it was a beautiful word that you said, our adopted family, our chosen family is our community, our friends. And I think everybody needs to have that in their life.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I think a lot of times people, like when they walk through something super hard or painful, they kind of want to move away from it and not have it as a reminder. And the people who are with them in it, even the spouse or the closest, can be who they want to separate from, because it's like a reminder of that time. And I think to flip that on its head and to look at it of, not only is this one of the few people who know all the things that you felt or that can relate to that, but that it's more of exactly what you said, of building the book of evidence. Like, who wants to just go and start over with people who haven't experienced the things or know what's made you, because all of those things make you who you are.
Yeah.
And if you separate from that, it's like, you can't remove that piece of you. It's still going to be within you.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that that has been the case for us, and that that community that we had then is still a big part of our community, and what that's done for everyone's faith and strength for things when they've had to face things. When you can see what you've already had the privilege to walk through with somebody else, I think helps build that in you for when it maybe is something that now you're facing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is. It's such a gift, that it's a gift for you that they were able to be there for you and support you and hold you up and do all the things during that time. But it also, like you said, was a gift for them, that when they're facing their own hard times, they're able to look and go, if Pete and Kim got through this, we can get through this, right? Like they can relate to that and almost draw strength from you to borrow for themselves during a time. You know what I'm saying? Like we always kind of can borrow somebody else's confidence or somebody else's, short term to get us through something. And they were able to kind of borrow the strength that they saw in you guys, going through their own hard things. And so it really is a gift both ways when we allow people into our life, and to be there in the ugly and the hard and the, sadness. It's a gift for both of you, really, when you let people in like that.
Yeah.
So I know you have a third baby you adopted. So
Yes.
how much, how did that happen?
Yeah, so this time we got a little more of a break. It wasn't 20 months. Mia was 3, and it happened similar to before where a friend of ours came to us. We hadn't gone into the process um, or anything, and a friend had come to us with knowing this. Her sister-in-law was a occupational therapist for this little girl who is in the foster system, and she just felt like she needed to tell us, and we were like, well, if the foster mom wants to talk to us, we'll totally talk to her and just kind of hear about this baby. And then a few days later, the friend calls me again and says, I feel like I have to tell you that her name is Emma, which was
Oh,
the
wow.
name we gave our first.
Yes.
And so that was kind of like a stomach drop
Yeah.
moment to where I remember thinking, okay, is this a warning or is this a sign?
Mm.
And having to even work through that, like, okay, but we shortly after talked with the birth mom, or not the birth mom, the foster mom. So it's a completely different scenario
Right.
with the first two. All of them have looked totally different. Um, and started kind of walking through that process of what that would look like. So with this Emma, the challenges and the things that came to us with her, unlike when you adopt a baby that's not born yet, you don't know what the possibilities are. And you're just like birthing a child, you don't know if this baby is healthy or what challenges this baby might have. With Emma Kate, baby number 3, we had a pretty good picture of a lot of fearful things. So they were speaking that she would not walk or talk, that she was born at 23 weeks. So full
Oh, wow.
term's 40 weeks. She was born at 23 at a pound, 3 ounces,
Wow.
and had been in the NICU for her first 5.5 months. And when they remove a child from a birth parent for whatever situations that might be, there is nobody with that baby in the hospital. They're not assigned a foster parent until they're released from the hospital.
Mm.
The birth family is not allowed to have contact with them. So that she was literally in the NICU by herself.
Wow.
And to this day, to meet her, you would know, you would have to believe that the nursing staff and everyone in there was loving on her like
Mm.
no one's business because
Mhm.
she's so joyful. But we were told pretty much every like reason why not to say yes.
Mhm.
She wouldn't talk, she wouldn't walk, she wouldn't be this, she wouldn't be this, she might not even live this long, she's going to be on oxygen forever, all these things. And I remember we had friends and people in our life out of all good intentions and
Mhm.
protection over us,
Mhm.
questioning if we should say yes, what that could look like, all of the things that anyone who has people who care about them are going to want to protect them from.
Yeah.
And I remember this time Pete was more like, let's do it. And I was a little more hesitant because I'm now thinking about our other 2 kids, my health. What if
Right.
something happens? Can I give enough? All of the things. Is it fair to the other 2? All
Right.
of the things a mom is probably going to sift through.
Mhm.
And I remember one night kind of just having this sense that whatever the situation is with Emma, that because of the health things that I have walked through, that I might be able to relate, of
Mm.
feeling different, missing out, not be doing the things that everyone else is doing. All of the being told all of your limitations, like all of that stuff just kind of
Yeah.
flushed through me and made me think, no, maybe we are exactly who should have her.
Mm.
So we had said yes, and that we had to get foster certified. That was like a whole process. But she was home on oxygen, all the things they said for her first probably year and a half with us. And their big thing with her was if she did not walk by 3, she would never walk. And that was so
Mm.
like the 3-year-old mark was this huge mark,
Right.
and she was not walking or doing any of the things. And like 2 days after her 3rd birthday, she started walking.
Oh, wow.
And since she's been like catching up on all the things. And to see her now, you would have no clue.
Wow.
No clue of how her life started and the challenges she's faced. But
She's walking,
watching
talking, not on oxygen.
all of it, no. In school, doing all the things. Um, yeah, it's so for her, it's a story
Mhm.
of what you face. But I try to remind her when we talk about it of all the things she was poked so many times a week and
Mm.
all the things that her little body went through with to see a child go through something like that is probably the biggest testament to witness because the strength and resilience that we innately have in us from
Mm.
a young age
Right.
is humbling as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. That even at that young age where the will and the want and the desire to fight, to live and make it through and overcome and all of that, like you said, it's just like it's in us,
Yeah.
and she's such a beautiful picture of that. And I just feel like I'm, listening to your story, and I just keep feeling like you guys are, you just continued to lean in and you didn't allow the things that were happening to you to harden your hearts or close yourself off or become more and more fearful and more disconnected. Instead, you just kept leaning into the hard every single time. Not that it was easy, not that it was perfect or any of those things, but like you just kept leaning in. And by way of doing that, beautiful, wonderful things just kept happening. Miracles kept happening and moving forward. And there's a huge lesson in that I wonder what it would have looked like if you guys would have fought that and went into fear. No, I don't want to do that. I want to protect my heart. I want to protect this. I want to protect my body.
Yeah.
You could have made any of those decisions at any point in time, but just continuing to be willing to keep an open heart and mind is what allowed you guys to continue to experience so much goodness.
Yeah. We would have missed out on a whole lot
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
let fear make our decisions, for sure.
Is there anything you can say to that of why, other than I feel like we've already said so much, of why you think you didn't allow fear to take root?
Yeah. When Emma, the second Emma that we just talked about, was born and we were given all that, there is a scripture that came to us, and it's, she is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future.
Mm.
So I painted that on a sign and had it above her crib, and we spoke it over her every night, every night, every night. And I remember she was probably about 4.5. And one night she said it on her own before we had said it.
Wow.
And just the words in that, without fear of the future, was something that we've had to hold on to, and we were holding on for her. And then to hear her speak that to this day, she just turned 11. She says that daily
Mm.
before bed.
That's amazing. That's beautiful.
So I think a lot of it is you have to speak it too into existence. You have to
Right.
speak life, even in the fear. And
Yeah.
even when you might not believe it, or you have nothing in front of you to say, like, this is possible, you
Mm.
have to continue to speak it. And that's something I think we've done even before that. We've just done in our own ways, moving through it, holding on to that, the knowing that we would have 4 or 5 kids, and just holding on to that no matter what, no matter what.
Mm. Yeah. So speaking of speaking life into and holding on to and having 4 babies, so that was your third. You guys adopted that you were able to adopt and have. And then another little miracle happened in your life.
Yep.
And I was shocked. I was so confused when I saw, I want to say it was Pete that had posted it because you and I didn't know each other yet at this time. And I saw a post from Pete on Instagram, I think it was. And I was so confused when I read it. I was like, wait a minute, did they just adopt another baby? Like, did they do like a surrogate? Like, I was so confused. I had to read his post multiple times before I was like, wait a minute, no, he's saying something else. So
Yeah.
let's move into the last phase of your story there.
Yeah.
Not last, but the most recent. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I'd mentioned after when I had the kidney transplant and how all my blood work and numbers were showing, Pete, I think, always carried in his heart someday we would have a baby. And so he had asked me, can we go and just get tested and see if it's possible? Like, your numbers look good. What if? What if that's a thing? So for him, it was not. I remember a friend asking me years ago if she was having to make some decisions with the extremes she would go to have a baby. And I remember having this conversation, and I remember asking her the question, is your desire, like, is your desire to carry a baby and to experience in that? Is it to just be a mom? Like, where's that for you? Neither's a wrong answer.
Right.
And I remember she wanted to carry a baby. That was so important to her. And then me, that wasn't sure that would be cool to experience. But for me, I just wanted to be a mom. I didn't care how it happened, what that looked like. I just knew I would be a mom someday. And so when Pete wanted to do this, I was kind of like, I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit unfair to the other three to even consider it. I kind of had to work through some of that. But we did all the testing, and we sat in front of a doctor as she said, I can't ethically even tell you to put money into something because there is no chance. There's no chance for in vitro. There's no chance for surrogate. Like, you literally do not make there's nothing to even work with.
Wow.
And so that kind of like shut that door. Pete felt complete because he at least checked to see if it was possible.
He had an answer.
Yeah, I wasn't devastated because I think I was protecting myself with I didn't need that anyway. And that was probably that. I think that might have happened even before Emma was born. So now Emma is 5, and I'm experiencing like this weird short of breath and all this stuff. And we live at
How old were you?
elevation. I am 39.
Okay.
No,
That time.
I'm 39, about to be 40 in a few weeks. Okay. And so I Google like short of breath, like what's causing that? The number one thing is pregnancy that comes up. And it's just like,
You're like, well, I know it's not that.
There's no way. What's number 2 and number 3?
Right.
And so I took a test. I don't even know what made me take a test, but I take a test and it quickly comes up positive. And I remember I had asked Pete years before to get, like, we had to backtrack a couple of years. We had a pregnancy test come up positive and it was not viable. So my body had to do like the full like thing it does for a miscarriage and walk through all that, all from knowing from the beginning that like it wasn't viable and all this. And the doctor's saying like, well, if this happened, it could happen again, but we know what the outcome will be, all of those things. So I had asked Pete to like go and do the thing that the guys have to go do. He hadn't done it. This happened. I did this test. And I remember coming down to his office and throwing it on his desk and saying, I told you I would not do this again. And I was just mad. Like, there was not even an ounce of me that was like, what if? Nothing. Right. Mad. Did that. I had to wait like 2 weeks until I could get into the doctor's office, which was weird in that. So every day I'm just waiting for all the things to happen to my body that I had to do before. I'm angry and all of it. And I go into the doctor's office. It was, I want to say, a couple of days after my 40th birthday. And I go into the doctor's office and the doctor opens the door and he like peeks his eye through the door crack and he's shaking his head. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, let's just do what we got to do. And he's like, well, we know what's going to be the outcome. And he does the ultrasound and he turns the screen to me and he goes, well, that right there is a very normal looking baby. Wow. And it's like, okay, I'm 40.
You're like, okay, what does that mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How far along were you at that time? Do you remember?
I think I was 9 weeks. I want to say. And so I had to go like every week, and they would give me a percentage like, okay, now we're this percent of a miscarriage. Now we're this percent.
Oh
And I
gosh.
remember like really guarding my heart through that whole thing and just being like, well, we'll get excited when we're at this point, or we'll get excited when we're at this point, and really kind of protecting myself.
Yeah.
And it just kept going and going. So the post you saw from Pete was, I remember I had gotten a onesie that said plot twist, and we had posted that, but there's a song that I quoted in that I'll forever remember, and it's a country song by Brad Paisley, but it's about like we make our plans and God laughs at it. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing like we can plan that's going to be as perfect as what
Yeah.
he's going to give you.
And so you gave birth to a baby girl, right? Healthy.
Healthy. I didn't get sick a single day. Like, it was the easiest pregnancy ever. Complete opposite of what I was told my whole life could happen. And yeah, so we're here now at 45 with a little one who's going to be 5 in a couple of weeks. And she was technically, we said 4 or 5. We have 4 under our roof, and 5, our 5th is out somewhere, hopefully happy and thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Oh my gosh, Kim, you guys have such an incredible story. You've had another kidney transplant since then. You have not stopped facing trials, even after all of this that you've been through. And I'm just curious that, like, looking back over everything y'all have been through, I mean, we're talking 20, 25 years of beautiful and hard, beautiful and hard, beautiful and hard, right? What would you say are some of the blessings? Like, obviously these children are amazing blessings, but what are some of the lessons that you learned or gifts that you got through the hard things that, looking back now, you can say, this was all worth it, or this is what came from it, or this is how I grew, this is what I learned? Like, I'd love to just hear from you on that side of things.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of what we've said kind of weaved through is I think we both have, I would say I am not a strong person in like every other aspect. I don't have courage to do anything, but in like circumstances that come my way, I have the book of evidence, as you said, which I love that. The book of evidence and the strength to know if I think that's like a big key to me for anyone who's walked through something hard, which so most people have in whatever that looks like. You're on the other side, and so many times when it's coming at you, you can't see the possibility of what's on the other side, and you're so in it. But to be able to move through it, like the book, you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you got to go through it. To go through it and to come on the other side, and to take the time to look back, like you just said, at what you did just walk through and that you've survived, and to find the things like the strength or the confidence that you have in your ability to do that. The people that were around you, all of the things that you have learned throughout it is only going to prepare you for the next, because we are not promised that we will have no hardship or that we'll have one or that we'll have two. There will be something else. It might be smaller and it might be bigger, but when you can take the time to look back at what you did move through and how you did and where you are now, that's my heart right now for teenagers, because I feel like everything that comes at them is so big because it's so real in the moment, and they don't have the history to look back on to see that there is another side, and it's probably not far from the moment they're in, but there is another side. And that's my biggest heart right now, is that kids would start to learn that, because the more of the challenges that come, the more the resilience is built, that muscle is worked, and that things won't throw them when they happen in the day to day. And so Yeah, that would be my biggest thing probably.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. And I agree. You and I have had lots of conversations about teenagers because we both have them. And it's that lack of, they don't have a book of evidence yet. They don't
Mhm.
have perspective yet. They don't have hindsight yet. And they can have it here and there. And I think as parents, that is part of our role, is to remind them, right?
Yeah.
Every time my son says, I can't do this, or I'm not going to make it, I remind him, you made it through this. You made it through this. You did this. You did that. Like, you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a message that everyone needs to hear, but especially young people today, for sure.
Yeah. I think people want to harbor so much on COVID this and COVID that, but I think as much as we can pull all the negative that's come from that, I think the kids who walked through that faced a huge thing at a young age that a lot of people don't have until they get older. And if that they can look at that and now see they're on the other side and what that is, that did such a justice for them, I think,
Mm,
in the future.
yeah.
And it's just even reminding them of that. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you walked through something we never even had to face when
Yeah.
we were your age.
Many
And
adults didn't handle it well.
right,
Yeah.
right. So I think like there's something with letting your kids experience some challenges because
Hmm.
it is building that for them and they'll be able to face it when they get out
Yeah.
on their own.
Yeah. That's a wonderful perspective. And I think that's one of the things that I've gained through sitting here talking with you and talking with you in the past, is that um, it really is all about being able to maintain perspective, um, and seeing things through more than one lens, um, and just never giving up. And you've been a beautiful, beautiful picture of that, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation. I know that it can be a hard conversation to listen to because there's a lot of pain in it, but there's so much more beauty and wonderful things that came from it. And so I know that people listening, this is really going to benefit them greatly, to help them just keep putting one foot in front of the other and to keep going.
Yeah, that's what we all have to do every day.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. This story was a remarkable testament to human resilience, courage, and perseverance. To help you manage the ups and downs of your own life journey, I have a special gift for you called the Resilience Playbook. This free guide includes 12 resilience factors that gave me hope, inspiration, and empowerment during some of my darkest times. Whether you're navigating the ups and downs of a relationship, maybe you're facing unexpected twists in your career or your business, or you're tackling personal health challenges, whatever that challenge is in your life today, this playbook will equip you with the tools you need to strengthen your resilience muscle. To get your copy, find me on Instagram and send me a DM with the words playbook, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. Before we part ways today, I want to remind you that you can do hard things, and that strength lies within you, just waiting to be unveiled. I hope you'll carry the lessons shared today with you as you grow, evolve, and strengthen your resolve. If you enjoyed this episode, be a good friend and share it with someone you know could use it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, take care, my friend.